All right, I'm rolling. You guys can proceed to talk for another time.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Talking TWAMPs. My name is Ryan Walter, and I'm going to be your host today for our discussion about the Democratic strategy moving forward with Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, as well as some hintings of potential 2020 runs for the Democratic primary. I'm going to start by introducing our panel. To my left is...
Hi, I'm Joe. I'm from the great state of Ohio, and I am a Russian Studies and International Relations major here at the college.
Hi, I'm George. I am from the Commonwealth of Virginia, Northern Virginia specifically. I am also, like Joe, a Russian Studies and International Relations student, and I am the token conservative.
Hello, everybody. I'm Blake. I am originally from Missouri, but it is a long time since my family has voted there. I am effectively a Nova kid as well.
My name is Jacob. I am from Yorktown, Virginia, a little backwater in our own local district here. And I am, I guess, to put a counterpoint to George, I am going to be our raving communist.
And like I said, my name was Ryan. I am a geology and history major here at the college, hailing from Richmond, Virginia. So we're all Virginian here except for good old Joe. So being the unique state person here, Joe, why don't you talk about your thoughts on Nancy Pelosi basically getting the confirmation as a speaker and what you think that means for the Democratic strategy moving forward?
So I'll start with a quick recap of what happened. Right after the House election, there was a period in which it was in question whether Nancy Pelosi would, in fact, be reelected as Speaker, because a large number of Democrats, led by my grandfather's congressman, Tim Ryan, from Youngstown, Ohio, signed a paper saying that they would not vote to elect her Speaker. For a number of reasons, both the far right and far left of the Democratic caucus were unsatisfied with her, and then a number of Democrats won their elections on the promise that they would not vote for her. That said, as of now, it appears that leadership challenge has essentially been overcome. Primarily, I would argue, and you can have your takes on this, I would argue because nobody really stood up as the alternative. It was just anti-Pelosi. There was no pro-anybody. And as a result, right now, it's almost certain that she will be reelected as Speaker. This is my hot take, which I expect actually to be controversial because the prevailing opinion, I think, has been the opposite, is that it's not that bad. It's not that bad for the Democrats that Pelosi will be the public face of their party for a few reasons. Firstly, I would argue that yes, she is monumentally unpopular, but I think that has to do with the fact that anybody who's in that position will become unpopular eventually, simply because Congress is unpopular. And secondly, because we're going into a presidential year rather than a midterm year, eventually there will be a Democratic nominee, which we'll talk about later in the episode, who will take over that role as the public face of the Democratic Party.
And I think there's an important point there about anybody in the speaker position or as the leader of a party in the House is going to be unpopular. I mean, Paul Ryan was an incredibly popular congressman. He was young. He came in, I believe, on one of the early Tea Party waves.
But as a kind
of moderate Republican.
He was elected in 98, way long ago.
Yep. I didn't realize it. Okay, so
Fun story. Do you know how he started? He actually used to be an intern, and he used to actually wash dishes at District Taco right there by Capitol South Metro Station.
But so Paul Ryan was very broadly popular in the Republican Party.
Enough so to be the vice presidential nominee in 2012. Yeah.
Right.
A thing I constantly forget.
And then he becomes the Speaker of the House, and immediately is incredibly unpopular, especially among this new wave of Republican voters who were voting for Trump. And now he has left the House. He is leaving the House.
Again, though, after nearly 40 years of service, I mean, not 40, nearly 20 years of service, this man, it was
sure,
kind
but
of...
this is a guy who...
That's 10 elections.
This is a guy who reached the pinnacle of his political career. He was Speaker of the House, was in no significant danger of losing his seat to a Democrat.
I think he's leaving for reasons that have nothing to do with his unpopularity. I think he served for 20 years, and the man is done.
I think Jacob brings up a good point that the man reached his political apex incredibly quickly. compared to most congressmen and elected representatives. I think the problem is, and this is something that I'm always of the opinion of, we've had many discussions of, is that he has I think he's seen that the Republican Party in many ways has lost his way, and he no longer is someone who is the figurehead of the Republican Party. 4 years ago, he was the vice presidential nominee, and a lot of people were tapping him to be the
presidential nominee.
In the House, he led. He basically orchestrated Republican efforts in the House.
Yeah.
Republicans fell into line behind Ryan.
No, Paul Ryan is clearly the sort of new Henry Clay figure of this era. The idea that he got.
I don't know if I'd go that far.
Well, I don't. Not in the sense I would be more pro. I think Henry Clay's policies. But what I'm saying is that he started extremely young. He got very, very popular very, very quickly. Almost was the president a couple of times, or vice president. Yeah. And now we'll see him pop up every once in a while in some sort of, he'll make a statement, or maybe he'll go on to a law career or something.
Yeah, so he's really the new William Jennings Bryan, is what you're saying.
Except for William Jennings Bryan never really held a seat effectively.
So we're not going.
Yeah, I know.
He'll be back.
Though let's put this. We should do an episode on William Jennings Bryan.
Okay,
he once gave a speech from my great grandmother's porch.
Moving forward, but going actually back to what I was saying is that he has. I mean, the biggest criticism of Paul Ryan recently hasn't been that Republicans aren't falling in line behind him. I think that the biggest criticism of Paul Ryan recently has been that he's been spineless.
Yeah.
And has completely melted away from the values that he was concrete on.
Which I think is because he knew he was leaving.
Maybe. I think he's leaving because of that, and he realizes that his path is much narrower.
Well, this is what I'm saying.
I think it's cyclical. I think that he's leaving because he realizes that he can't do it. But I think that especially in the last 2 years that he's held his seat, I think he's given up on some of those values because he knew that he couldn't push them through.
Well, this is what I was saying when I said he was leaving because he was unpopular. Not that it's the unpopularity himself; it's that he cannot hold the principled positions he wants to hold.
I think he remains figuratively popular. I think Paul Ryan, if you were to pitch him to most Republicans would say, "Yeah, I like Paul Ryan."
Okay, so question then is: do you think Nancy Pelosi is going to have the same problem? Do you think she's going to sort of wither away to the calls for moving left, like Paul Ryan did, to the calls to move right?
The Democrats don't have that kind of organized caucus. There's no Democratic Tea Party. There's the DSA, but they're not mainstream like the Tea Party became. The Tea Party became a mainstream electoral.
I would contend that the Tea Party's not mainstream. Like even the House Freedom Caucus was never taken quite seriously by Republican leadership, either under Paul Ryan or under John Boehner.
I would argue that the DSA is getting close. DSA is getting close to being this sort of Tea Party-esque.
They will.
I have long contended that the Democrats' response to the Tea Party was going to be to create their own sort of further left-wing response group. And I don't think the DSA got there this election, but I think that if they continue to be popular, if Ocasio-Cortez, sort of as their figureheaded leader, continues to gain national popularity, especially in urban districts, they could make a push for it in 2020. But I think Nancy Pelosi's mistake is not now. I think her mistake occurred in 2010. I think that she is the first Speaker of the House to have lost her majority or his majority and have not resigned their seat. Before Nancy Pelosi, every Speaker of the House who lost their majority resigned their seat and left politics. Not as a sort of symbolic, presence of you lose your majority, you leave, but just in the sense that it's sort of a rebuke of you as a politician because you run effectively the push in the House for control. And when you lose that push, whether or not it's your fault, you leave. Pelosi didn't do that.
I think this kind of folds into a broader political trend, though, which is that we are seeing the political establishment isn't turning over.
Right. Yeah.
Clinton ran in 202016.
She will run again.
And she will run again.
If she runs again, I will die.
She will run again.
Bush ran in 2016. Jeb Bush, a man who, outside of his family name and outside of that kind of legacy, was not a national figure.
No, he lost his window, especially under, I think the latest he could have effectively run is I would argue 2012.
But I think we're seeing
He was the favorite
kind of,
by far. Like before everything really got rolling with the Republican primary, it was everyone was predicting a Clinton Bush.
But that's because of establishment assumptions that were proved patently wrong.
That's fair.
On the Republican side.
I'm not saying that statistically he had missed his window. I'm just saying, popularly speaking, given how his lack of presence in national politics for a long time. I mean, the last time he was nationally relevant was when he played a hand in the 2001 election.
Yes.
Yeah. But I think it's a broader trend of the establishment isn't turning over in a way that it has in the past. I mean, you take during the Reagan presidency, Tip O'Neill, was the famous speaker of the Democratic Speaker of the House, who was this kind of stalwart. But even he, when he lost the House to Newt Gingrich,
he left.
He left because it was a failure of his political philosophy, and I think it's a failure of the Democratic Party that they can't see that.
Interestingly enough, even Newt Gingrich, who I contend is one of the most slimy politicians that we've recently seen,
He's like a newt.
He left.
He left when he lost the House. Two, it should be noted, his
Nancy
own
Pelosi.
strategy. Nancy Pelosi, running on a similar strategy.
Yeah.
He also had $100 million spent to have him elected president, and he didn't win a single
Yeah,
vote.
Listen.
We can't rehash Newt Gingrich's entire career.
But so I guess in a roundabout counterpoint to Joe, I do see Nancy Pelosi as being a problematic figure for the Democrats right now. Not for the reasons that a lot of people like. I'm not saying it's simply because she's old guard. Believably enough, we still would have put somebody reasonably old in the speaker's chair. We tend to
the only two alternatives, and I can't remember their names right now, were 72 and 76, and,
right.
And Pelosi is what, 73?
Right. So I'm not saying it's about age or some sort of old guard thing. My concern is that the Democrats are going to run into, especially. Well, no, the same problem that the Republicans had with Boehner. The idea that Nancy Pelosi is going to have a very hard time building vote consensus in the House, which the Democrats desperately need to block and push forward their own agenda. She cleared the hurdle. She is the Democratic nominee to be Speaker of the House, because for those of you who are not familiar with how the House Speaker is selected, there's technically a runoff. Technically, the Democrats put forward a candidate. Technically, the Republicans put forward a candidate. Technically, the House votes, and technically, they elect someone. The reason I add that caveat of technically is because whatever party controls the House is inevitably going to elect their candidate. But Pelosi cleared that hurdle. She is the nominee for the Democratic Party to be the Speaker of the House.
With the help, it should be noted, of some
Republican votes.
Yeah.
Which makes me uneasy.
But there is still an opposition group in the Democratic Party who is saying that they're going to do their darndest to make sure that she doesn't get actually effectively elected to the speakership. I think she will. I don't think that it's effectively enough of a barrier. But those votes are the same votes that she's going to have a problem coalescing to get stuff passed or blocked.
Well, in just the same way that Boehner had with the Tea Party.
Right.
And that, for the Republican Party, moved them farther to the right, which leads to how Trump is elected. If the Democrats want to elect someone of similar parity, but on the other side of the spectrum, then that group of people who is blocking her, they want to keep doing that strategy.
And that is my concern. She's already beginning to make statements about who she's going to put in committee leadership to concede to the very far left of the Democratic fringe.
I would like
There's
to
even
say,
discussion
though,
that Kamala Harris may lose her possibility of being the leading seat.
Well, that's the Senate. And that is going to happen.
Sorry, not Kamala.
For completely different reasons.
Not Kamala. I didn't mean Kamala Harris. I meant, who am I thinking of?
Cortez?
Yes, yeah, that Cortez might get a seat as a member
as
of
a
the
chair.
I
As a
would
chair.
like to say, though, to throw a kind of bucket of cold water over this kind of thing, I don't think it's particularly important to Nancy Pelosi or even to the Democratic Party, and nor should it be, that they have a legislative agenda that they have to coalesce behind, because they are not in power. if they controlled the Senate, it would be one thing, right? You could pass legislation and the onus would be on Trump to veto it. They don't even control the Senate.
They have to be a rump.
They have to be a roadblock, just as a structural fact.
And you know
All
what?
right, I want to hear George's opinion on this. He has not spoken.
Yeah, going back to Blake, I would contend that there's no way she's going to get a chair because, first of all, Rules Committee deals that out, and there's no way that there's already like a clear succession line for Democrats that have already been falling behind, like holding the party line. They are the ones that are like in the world of House backroom deals and promises made and kept and broken. There are clear people that should be receiving the various chairs. Cortez isn't going to get it. Namely, number one, she's been fighting the establishment, which is never a good move.
And she's a freshman senator.
And she's a freshman.
Representative.
This would be completely.
I wasn't saying that I thought it was a good probability. I'm just saying that there are whispers in a way that there aren't typically whispers.
And there are whispers that Blake Barrow was going to win in Texas, but yeah, okay.
The one other thing that I'll say for Pelosi, there's one thing I have to challenge here, and this is the idea that most of the opposition to Pelosi was from the left of the Democratic Party. I think that is the big distinction that you do see, that the majority of the opposition to Pelosi was on the right wing of the party. If you look at that list of people who signed that list, sure, you get people like Marcia Fudge who was on the progressive side,
but you get people like Spanberger.
Yeah, Spanberger, Ben McAdams. Did Luria sign that?
Luria made statements promising it, but did not sign the actual agreement.
And hell, Tim Ryan, despite being from Youngstown, is fairly conservative for a Democrat.
Well, because this isn't necessarily motivated on that end by ideology. Nancy Pelosi isn't actually, despite Republican statements about her, particularly progressive. It's because there are electoral incentives for them to be opposed to Nancy Pelosi.
So that's my concern.
They're in vulnerable districts.
It's actually more concerning for the Democrats that it's the right wing of the party that's opposing her, because that's the party that's the piece that she desperately needs to hold in line in order to be that roadblock.
And for them to win.
Well,
in
this is
2020 is those voters that voted for those right-leaning parts of the Democratic Party, Spanberger, Luria, all of those.
Of course, right-leaning being relative, they're still moderate Democrats.
And I would assert as well that there are certain particular policy issues on which Nancy Pelosi is actually pretty progressive, namely gun control being one of them.
That's true.
Yeah, there are particular.
But I would argue that has
pretty
much,
insane on
that has much. This is where we get a
But
breakdown into what
when we're talking about a
ideology.
division within the Democratic Party, the division on gun control isn't as large. Except when we're talking about those centrist Democrats, the division is on economic matters.
Exactly.
And Nancy Pelosi takes money from big banks.
Exactly. I think when it comes to
when it
comes to guns, there's a much bigger difference between California Democrats and rest of the country Democrats than progressive Democrats and centrist Democrats. Feinstein, senator from California, one of the most right-leaning senators in the Democratic Party on everything except guns. Mm-hmm. Sanders,
exactly.
I think a B+ from the NRA or something like that.
Yeah,
so there's a difference
a particular
there.
culture at work there, having to do with California's
and Vermont
state
and
politics,
New Hampshire,
particularly.
Yeah.
I hate guns.
So I would say that you're actually right, that one of the advantages of Pelosi for the Democrats is exactly that. She is willing to be that roadblock in a way that Tim Ryan, I think, would not be, and is willing to not be bipartisan, which, probably on principle not a good thing, but probably politically a good idea for the Democrats.
I think
right
the
now.
Democrats are going to have the same problem
On a
with Pelosi that they did
fundamental
with
level,
Clinton.
I'm opposed to that kind of roadblockiness because I
of
think
course,
our
I am
government
as well.
should function.
Yes, but what the Republicans have been doing this for 8 years. Why are you?
Well,
So it's not even a reciprocal thing. I'm, again, to echo the sentiment
Echo
of
the first episode we ever had.
To echo the sentiments of the table, I am not a big fan of roadblock politics because I think that it's effectively not how you should govern.
It's bad for our
I'm just saying I think it's good politics. I'm not saying it's good policy. I think it's good politics.
And what compromise is there?
And I will
That's
say,
my concern. That is my concern. This administration is the one place where I think roadblock politics are actually crucial policy-wise.
I will say
doing nothing is better than doing what Trump wants.
Because the wall is what is next.
In certain areas.
Yeah.
George, your
Obviously,
thoughts.
there are
You're
certain
quiet over
areas
there.
where-
Thoughts on what? There's been so many things thrown around. I have thoughts like you can ask me a specific question.
That's what you got to do in this podcast. You got to jump in.
All right. I will ask the moderating question then. playing roadblock. Do you think that is we're talking about democratic strategy?
It's the prisoner's dilemma. Shout out to Econ. No, but like seriously, if the Republicans engage in it, Democrats engage in it, and if one party backs out, then the other one's just going to do it again. So there's no incentive to not engage in roadblock politics. Roadblock politics. There's no incentive to.
And do you think that do you think that Pelosi's going to do that moving forward?
Most likely. I think we are going to have, what is it? We're now in the 116th Congress, or the next one?
No, 107.
Well, let's talk about this
Whatever.
specific
No, we are going to have a replay of the 113th Congress back when the Republicans on the Tea Party wave back in 2012 took control of the House and the Senate was Democratic and nothing got done, and we had one shutdown in October, and it was awful. We're going to have a replay of that exact same situation.
That is the one thing that I would prefer that they did not do, especially since they control the House where the budget's going to originate. I would prefer that they not instigate a shutdown. That is, I think, beyond the roadblock politics.
I don't think they should do roadblock. I know that you guys keep saying it's a policy, but I don't think they should do roadblock, because if they do roadblock, they do the exact same thing. They only ignite Trump's base to vote for him, and they lose those suburban votes.
So what if the Republicans put forward the wall? You're saying that they should fund the wall?
I think that they should trade the wall. Joe mentioned trading Puerto Rico for the wall, but I think you should do something else.
You can't get Puerto Rico for the wall. They won't take it.
I know they won't. Then
you put something forward.
This administration isn't going to bargain in that way for their
good
policy.
faith.
Right?
Yeah,
I agree.
I think the main problem is with every single not you, George, but most of those right-leaning Republican voters are going to be like, oh, well, now the Democrats are in place. Now it's time for them to compromise. They have their opportunity, and when they don't, it only ignites
They're
suburban
going to say that
voters.
no matter what. That's politics.
I understand that is politics, but now that the Democrats are in control, what did Trump do as soon as the Democrats won the House control? What was the first thing he did?
He congratulated Nancy.
He said yes, and vote for Nancy Pelosi, because he knows that Nancy Pelosi is his greatest.
I will say this: we can get beyond the superficial.
He knows that Nancy.
Since when did we take his tweets?
He knows that Nancy Pelosi is a death nail in the Democrats' chances of 2020.
I will say this.
I actually agree with Ryan in there, because Nancy Pelosi, particularly if she cannot avoid her California inclination to go hard on gun control, that will be music to the ears of the GOP.
So yeah, let me say rolls out gun control, maybe.
Let me say this.
Rolls back on that.
Wait, no. I think
you're letting
the
exact same thing happen. Clinton represented everything corrupt in politics. Even if she wasn't, she represented.
I'm not pro Pelosi. I'm not pro Pelosi.
The problem
everything
is
establishment.
I'm going to go back to what Blake said. I think anyone who's going to be speaker is going to be unpopular. Anyone who is going to be elected is going to be used as a foil for Trump and the Republicans. Here, what I think is the golden ticket for Democrats. I think Pelosi should take it. She should have her fights with Trump or whatever. She should get smeared, and in June of 2020, she should say that she's not running for speaker in 2021.
Just absolutely take all of the negative energy
and take
with her.
all that they've been building up for years, because this is what the Republicans did with Clinton, right?
Right.
Sure, Clinton had problems, but the main political issue is that the Republicans had years and years and years.
They saw her coming.
Had to add on to it, and that sunk her much
so
more than
I think you guys are right, but when it comes to roadblock politics, what we're forgetting is that Nancy Pelosi does need to think about the Democratic Party in general. Right? So she does need to think about their popularity in general, and that would encourage her to compromise, right? Because that would be more popular with swing voters.
But she can compromise on certain issues without passing certain others.
I agree.
But the thing is, as a general fact, she needs to roadblock every last bill that the Trump administration sends her. Otherwise, she gets primaried in 2020.
Okay, first
by
of all,
whom? By whom?
Yeah, somebody should primary her. First of all, not a problem.
Ocasio-Cortez was primarying a Democrat who had been in that seat for years and had an almost identical voting record to Nancy Pelosi.
Somebody should primary her.
You know, the interesting thing, I would love to get into this election because it's fascinating. Oftentimes, the primaries which are going on in the Democratic Party have much more to do with, I'm going to say, everybody's going to cringe, but I'm going to say it, with identity politics than it does with policy. If you look at the precinct reports for that election, the old white guy won the Hispanic areas. Ocasio-Cortez won the white areas. Because whites tend to be more progressive than minorities, whatever you're going to call it.
That's a rebuke of identity politics. Because
that's the point.
The punditry around Ocasio-Cortez was that she won on the new Hispanic vote in her district, that it had been increasing. I mean, that was the punditry, which she didn't, clearly.
No, I think that there is a necessary caveat to Jacob's statement on the fact that she's got to roadblock everything out of the Trump administration, because one thing that the Trump administration is backing right now is the First Step bill, which is going to roll back three strikes laws on the federal level. It is going to release thousands of
That's a Clinton policy, isn't it?
That was a bill.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but the point is that it's now part of the progressive platform is rolling back certain prison reform, or instituting certain prison reforms. It'll also release several thousand drug offenders from federal prisons, and it will increase the chances of federal prisoners being able to see their families because they won't be able to be far away from their kids in a disparate federal prison system.
That actually happened not too long ago. I think like a couple of years ago here in this Commonwealth of Virginia with our governor, Terry McAuliffe, who's actually also a long-known Clinton apparatchik.
And who's apparently running for president.
And a potential 22. We're going to get to that in a second.
Yeah, no.
But thinking policy-wise, I know that Cortez and her little coalition that she's very much the head of has that Green New Deal that they're talking a lot about, which I am a fan of, but that's just, I'm the environmental crazy guy here. Also,
no, I think those are the
planet's
places
dying, guys.
I
but
think
also,
those are the places where
if you
Pelosi
could trade
needs to be ready
that
to
for
compromise.
you could trade that. For
Yeah, I think the Green New Deal is actually interesting in that if Trump was really
can we not get into this?
If Trump was really
about jobs creation, yada yada.
But if he really wanted to capture the votes of those areas that he needs, he would be in favor of the deal.
No, he's intelligent. He knows what he's doing.
I don't know. I think he might go for it because this would be the giant grand infrastructure spending that
it would be incredible if they did it. Just like as a personal fan of policy, it would be amazing. They need to.
I'm not suggesting that he wouldn't go for the bill. I'm just saying he wouldn't back it without attaching some of his own personal caveats.
Oh no, that's what I'm saying. Is I think Trump should be championing it to make it his issue.
I think he shouldn't do that. I think if his strategy was clear, he should be championing.
Shoehorn it into something else.
He should be championing a pipeline bill that they then attach the Green New Deal.
The thing is,
the problem is the Green New Deal actively goes against pipelines.
Trump's policy is not policy-based. It's cultural-based.
That's what I'm saying.
The reason he can't be for that is because his voters don't actually care about the economy. They care about the green.
Well, right. They hear the word coal and...
So that's what I'm saying. Right? If it were to be called an infrastructure bill, blanket, and that it would fund pipelines, which he has constantly pushed as an idea for... if you build
don't bring in American workers. They're all
I know,
workers.
But the point is that his punditry is still that if you put forward a pipeline, American workers will build it.
But even if foreigners do come, that's going to at least temporarily in the short term create an influx in America.
Listen, I'm not pro it. I'm just saying that it's his platform, and if he were to attach it to the Green Bill as an infrastructure omnibus bill, then maybe it would be able to pass. That's long form is what I was talking about in terms of where Pelosi should be ready to compromise. But
why I said that.
Well, I mean, obviously she should be smart,
but I think her public policy still needs to be roadblocking.
Yes.
All right.
When
so
it comes to
who is she
stuff
gonna?
like immigration,
Right. I have a question. Who do you think she's gonna? We've been talking about her coalescing behind a candidate for 2020. Joe, who's your hot take on that?
On Pelosi or on me?
No. On who you think the
2020
person that she's going to have to coalesce.
He's opening the 2020 presidential election topic, Joe.
Joe, what shirt are you wearing right now as we speak together?
2 words.
Amy Klobuchar.
Beto O'Rourke.
You know what? I'll take the bait. So the people around this table and those who are very careful to listen to this podcast know that since about a week after the 2016 election, I have been a very strong advocate of Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown for President of the United States in 2020. And in recent weeks, it has become evident from his interviews, from his topics,
he posted on
and
his
such.
website, what do you think about 2020?
And I wrote into that, and I got my grandparents to write into that too. So we're fingers crossed. So as an Ohioan and as like a person who cares about policy, I'm behind him all the way. That said, as a political analyst, I don't think it's a great idea.
What?
It's
And
because he
I've
has
said
no
this.
charisma.
He has okay.
He has no.
He has all the charisma.
We had
No,
this big
ladies and
discussion.
gentlemen, my shocked reaction was genuine. I am
Yes,
actually
because Trump
stunned.
is just exudes charisma.
No.
Actually,
I've
kinda
had
does.
this discussion, but I've had this discussion
Trump is
before.
Trump is
And
charismatic.
we've had
In a
we've had
sort
this
of
discussion
demagogish
before.
way.
It is 100% politics and running for president now is 100%. This is going to be sound a little weird. It's sex appeal.
I mean, it's always
I don't
been
think
that.
Trump has sex
No,
appeal.
I
know, it's not about
completely disagree.
It's not only
He is
about sex
a
appeal.
ton.
And here's what I think.
I mean,
You
I
may
think
be
Obama
right,
proved
but I
Ryan's
think,
point.
I think that you can get away with it if you're with the populist appeals. Did you not watch him at the 2016 Democratic convention? He has a different style. Sure, like he's not fuckable like Beto O'Rourke is, right? But he has something else. So I
Joe
disagree
wrong.
with you.
Prove Joe wrong.
I disagree with you fundamentally that the problem with Sherrod's candidacy is his electability. I think he would smash Trump.
Well, I think we
The
have to
key
talk
is-
about the 2018 midterms.
Exactly.
No one else can hold that Senate seat.
Well, yes, and that gets exactly to the point of it. The main problem for Democrats is, you got to think beyond who's at the top of the ticket. You got to think beyond if they want to start really moving away from the Trump legacy and doing anything. You need to. I'm sorry to say, George, you got to get rid of McConnell. If you're the Democrat,
Oh my God,
if you're a Democrat,
please.
if you're a Democrat, remembering what happened in early 2016,
I would
all
take a
throughout
different
Obama's
Republican
term,
over McConnell.
the Democrats' top priority, almost more than the presidency. It's like close.
If
needs
Ann
to be
Coulter
retaking
wanted
the
to
Senate.
move to Kentucky and run against McConnell, I would take that.
And that is a very tough situation for them in 2020. And there is nobody. Sure. If Sherrod won, there would be a special election. It would not just be DeWine putting him in, but there's nobody else who can hold that seat.
No one
And
even close to Sherrod.
Sherrod is a god incarnate in Ohio politics.
But we saw this in the 2018 midterms, which
Exactly.
is that there was another Democrat who was not a terrible candidate, and his opponent was not particularly charismatic, but he just did not have the appeal that Sherrod had, and he lost by a significant margin.
The key about Sherrod, which makes him such a powerful candidate, is that if you look at his voting record, actually, he is one of the most progressive Democrats in the Senate. Which surprises a lot of people because he has an ability to deliver those
Exudes
ideas.
conservatism.
No, that's not even true.
no.
I watch him like this.
He has
he's
a
not.
he's
No,
a
yes,
complete
absolutely.
he does
no.
not.
There's a fundamental difference between, for example, Joe Manchin, who runs as a conservative Democrat, and Sherrod Brown, who runs, I would argue, as like an old style labor guy.
He's a Democrat farmer. Yeah. Like the old.
Farmer labor, you could call it
Yeah.
that. And the reason he's been able to do that is because he has his own style and he separates himself from the National Democratic Party, which I think in this era of polarization is absolutely necessary for a Democrat to win nationally.
And to be able to vote his conscience and not as part of.
So I think a big part of Sherrod Brown is really where the Democratic Party needs to be. It's running on the same platform of there aren't enough jobs in my home area, but this is the Democratic solution to those jobs. And Sherrod Brown has pushed, as far as I've been able to see on his voting record, a lot of jobs bills through, but that have to do less with sort of hearkening back to some 50s era when all of the steel mills were pumping out smoke, and more of an idea of employing Ohioans to some other end, shipping or service sector or something to that effect. Which, if anything, is a callback to the West Virginia area as well. Not necessarily Joe Manchin, West Virginia, but Byrd, West Virginia. Way old West Virginia politics.
But so if that's true, I mean, the question is, who else is a viable Democratic candidate?
And this is
so
why
happy you
before
asked.
I
And
go
the
to
answer
this,
is not Clinton, please.
I want
the answer is very much not Clinton.
I want to
There's
hit
one
what Blake
clear
said
answer.
before we get to what Ryan's going to say because I'm going to be mad at Ryan.
Okay.
I think it's very clear. You said Amy Klobuchar. She is number 2 on my list, and the reason is I think the evidence of the 2018 midterms is we talked about this briefly. Is that the Democrats have a much easier time retaking Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin than they do in some pipe dream of flipping Texas and Georgia.
Okay.
which
go
is
after Texas.
I'm not wrong.
I am not
is
saying
very, very correct.
I'm not saying
No,
you're
Joe's
wrong.
correct. It's 15 years early.
I 100% agree with you that they should not pursue the Sun Belt strategy. That does not mean that they cannot have someone from the Sun Belt to pursue the Northern Window strategy.
But it would mean that that person is not ideal. And this hypothetical person that we may or may not be speaking about also goes back to what we were saying earlier about the Senate, because there is a potentially competitive Senate seat in Texas, which would be vital to a Democratic majority. So for the same reason, so if we're taking a compromise, if we're going to compromise on Amy, I'm behind that.
I like Amy Klobuchar.
I think for the same reason, in an ideal political situation for the Democrats, both Sherrod, blessing be upon him, and this hypothetical person who we may or may not be talking about would stay in those particular lanes. That's not going to happen, obviously, but we're just talking ideal situations. Now go, Ryan.
Well, I think
You've been waiting a long time.
No,
I don't have anything of substance. I was just going to ask Joe, are you in a cult?
Sherrod Brown, praise be unto him.
It's the entire state.
No, but like,
have you seen our garage? It looks like a cult is out. It actually looks like a cult thing out there.
Yeah, which if we had to paint in broad strokes what the Democratic strategy needs to be 2020 is that we need to evacuate the coastline. We have to get away from not like physically.
You're talking about like you're going to get 200,000 people from Nova to move to Wyoming.
No, that's not
well, Blake, with
that would be a good
warming
idea.
and
I think
current
what Blake-
rates, in 12 years,
I
we
think
will
what
need
Blake
to evacuate
means-
the coastline. Thank you.
I think what Blake means is we need to get away from sort of like this far left progressive like identity politics culture war, like leftist politics.
No. What I'm
If I
saying is that
understand
we need to start making our national face Democrats from non-coastal states.
I agree
we
with
need
you.
people like Sherrod Brown, maybe if not running for president, that at least is sort of the public identity of the Democratic Party. McCaskill lost her seat, but that sort of figure, the idea of a Democrat who can win in the West, being the ideal Democratic candidate, because I think that a lot of those people in the modern Democratic Party have been stigmatized because everybody thinks, oh, Western Democrat, they're super pro-gun, they're super against X, Y, but you can be not an actively anti-gun, but you can be a sort of a neutral gun Democrat in the West. The key is that they're backing policies that don't only help the banking sector.
Well, I think it comes down to what Brown's kind of political philosophy,
Down to
for lack of
Brown?
a better word, which is kind of classical progressivism, Western progressivism.
Right.
If to call back actually to a different episode, like William Jennings Bryan in the early 1900s. And we saw that in Iowa. A Republican House of Representatives member was unseated. Iowa now has 3 Democratic representatives and 1 Republican one.
I can't believe they kept Steve King.
Because the Democrats ran on a very progressive platform, but one which isn't progressive in the coastal way that's become associated with Nancy
Which
Pelosi.
is why the key person for the Democrats is not Brown, even though I like Sherrod Brown. I want to say, put on the record, I do not disagree with anything Joe said. I think that he is absolutely right. I agree with you that they need to get away from coastal progressivism, from the coastal elitism of the progressive movement right now. But I think that there is a different candidate from Texas who it would be better to run for president than for that Senate seat, who represents the exact same middle America, maybe a little more southern progressivism, and that is Beto O'Rourke.
Listen, I don't think Beto O'Rourke is a losing candidate,
Beto
but
O'Rourke
I don't think he's the candidate we need for the down ticket elections, for the down ticket races.
Beto O'Rourke excited Democratic voters across the country, and particularly in Texas, like no one has seen in
But Texas,
decades.
Dallas, and Austin are microcosms of New York.
And here's what I'm
He
going to
excited
say.
the far left progressive wing of the Democratic caucus. He did not appeal to these sort of
he
Midwest
raised-
moderate Democratic.
Here's what I'm
That's
going to
not
say.
true,
Look,
though. He
here's-
got closer than anybody else. He turned out
Moderate Republicans or moderate Democrats are in love.
because
with Beto
he was a candidate of necessity because there's no one else running
No,
against Ted
Beto
Cruz.
O'Rourke excited people like excited people more than anyone I've seen since Barack Obama in 2008. And I guarantee you that if he were to run for president, you would see the exact same type of basic grassroots movement. He won the black vote by 98%
I don't
or something
think
like
he's
that?
good for down ticket.
constant.
I don't think
That's a given. No,
it
it
is.
is not a given in Texas. If you look at the past voting records, no, it's not.
That is a given.
He gained it by additional 18%. That is still enough to excite it.
Here's the key argument.
Okay, it's a given,
Look,
and when he runs and he wins it, I'll be right.
okay. I think Beto O'Rourke would be a solid VP choice for Klobuchar. I'll say that. Top 5. Here's what I'm going to say. I think I agree with you. He's an exciting guy. On online and his rallies and such. Look how that worked out for Bernie. Here's what I'm going to say. I think Beto O'Rourke's success has much more to do with the fundamentals in that region than it does to do with him himself. If you compare the elections for Texas and Arizona, in Arizona, the person running, Kyrsten Sinema, is one of the most conservative Democrats in the House. Incredibly conservative. If you compare the Texas and Arizona races, Sinema improved more, both over 2016 and the previous Senate election there, than Beto O'Rourke did. I think this has much less to do with Beto O'Rourke as a person than it does with the fundamental growth that is happening, which will make the Sun Belt competitive, as Jacob said, in 15 to 20 years.
I disagree.
Sherrod Brown, on the other hand,
give it 10 to 15.
won by a large margin in a state which is moving the opposite direction. That is much more evident of a personal appeal than the fundamentals-driven Beto wave
I want to disagree with you, and I'm going to point to Beto O'Rourke was the first candidate in any Texas race ever to visit every single voting district in the state of Texas. He went to all of them over a year and a half campaign. I think that speaks volumes about him being personally likable and also personally committed to doing this.
What does moving your ass around the state have to do with being likable?
I'm sorry. This is the exact same. No. This is the exact same strategy that Barack Obama did in 2008, where he visited everywhere. He visited voting districts that hadn't seen a presidential candidate in over 100 years.
Yeah, but that doesn't reflect on his likability.
And the same thing that Trump did when he
reflect on his charisma.
The same thing that Trump did in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania is he focused on the areas they needed to focus on and visited them and actually held rallies and campaigns that excited him and made him a much more likable and personal candidate.
Yeah, but I mean, there's no reason that Amy Klobuchar couldn't do the same thing.
I think Beto O'Rourke has already shown that he is able to capture
Guys,
the minds.
we solve politics. All you got to do is move your ass around.
Thank you.
I can take a road trip to every county in Texas.
Yeah, that does not make me a
right?
popular person.
Why do we have campaigns? You just got to move around.
Hey, you want to keep saying that I'm wrong. All I have to do is move my ass around. Why is he so popular, then, George?
Actually,
why is he popular?
Because Donald Trump is deeply divisive.
And because Ted Cruz is well hated in his party.
I do want to say, though,
that is not true. Ted Cruz is not hated.
That Ryan is right. There is something about O'Rourke that is different, that is exceptional, at least in Texas, because there was a control race in Texas that we totally fucking forgot about. The governor's race. And the Democrat in the governor's race was swamped.
O'Rourke also had huge implications for down-ticket voting.
So what I'm saying is that O'Rourke did have something in Texas. I don't know that he's the best choice for a presidential candidate nationally because down ticket,
I don't think it translates at all.
Down ticket, he is not going to be appealing for, say, voters in Ohio.
And them shaking their head and looking smug at each other. Why is he so popular, George? You seem to key over there saying, "Oh, all I have to do is move my ass. I'll be popular," but you're not. So why is O'Rourke?
I think he's popular just on the basis that Donald Trump is deeply divisive and that he was.
But then why did the Texan governor's race go so badly for the Democrats?
I'll tell you why.
There was high turnout. I'll tell you. Like you said, Beto O'Rourke was excellent for the Texas down ballot vote. I'm gonna
answer both your questions. Firstly, I would argue that the Texas governor race is the exception rather than the Senate race. Firstly, Lupe Valdez, A, has a Hispanic surname, B, is a lesbian woman, and C, Abbott is hugely popular among independents.
I would like to say that in the last governor's race, the Democratic candidate was also a lesbian woman and outperformed Valdez this time. That kind of identity politics stuff.
That was also 4 years ago. Abbott is much more popular than Perry was. Yeah. So that's my. I think that I agree that is debatable. That is my thesis. Secondly, Ryan, I'll agree with you. There is something about O'Rourke. I think that something is he's got to meet. he's got a media personality, which, sure, you can say that's a subset of that. I think the reason he's so popular nationally is because he got a huge amount of hype and a vast amount of out-of-state funding and attention during the midterms because Democrats hate Ted Cruz.
Yes.
I think those two things, more than anything, explain his current popularity. A, he looks good on TV. B, everybody in the Democratic Party hates Ted Cruz.
Yeah, but we saw Kennedy Nixon.
I have a quick question. The Republicans were able to win the presidency with a candidate who had his flaws but was an incredible TV personality and held massive rallies that were able to drum up huge amounts of local support. So you're telling me that it is not in the Democrats' interest to pick someone who's an incredible media personality, who is able to host massive rallies with that inspire and drum up local support, grassroots support, and they also now have a massive fundraising advantage over the Republicans that they netted from the House election, from the midterm elections. So you're telling me that they should not do exactly what the Republicans did, even though the Democrats have more votes?
Yes.
I'm not saying that
Why?
I'm not saying that Beto O'Rourke would lose.
Why?
But
Yes,
the metaphor does not hold because I'm going to say
Joe
this.
is providing my answer.
Trump did not win. Clinton lost.
Yes.
If you look at the vote totals, what happened is not that Trump convinced a lot of people with all his rallies. What happened is that Clinton went home. Clinton voters stayed home. Trump got a significantly lower number of votes than Romney did in all the states he flipped, every single one.
Every one.
And he won anyway because Democratic turnout was further down. Now, you can make the argument potentially that media personality helps drum up turnout. That's possible.
I think that in today's day and age, media
But
personality
evidently,
is
that is not why Trump won.
And I would like to piggyback.
I'm not saying O'Rourke would lose.
I'm not saying he would either. I'm just saying he's not the ideal candidate because I think I would like to piggyback off of Joe's answer. The turnout numbers, so Donald Trump turned out fewer people in places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, which Hillary critically lost. And the kind of candidate that you need to turn out people in those areas is not necessarily a media personality. Those sorts of areas respond well to a candidate who is either regionally from that area or has a reputation of being honest in those progressive, those sort of traditionally progressive stances.
Okay, fair enough. O'Rourke is traditionally progressive in that he is very moderate, central
That's
Democrat.
not what I'm saying. That's not a traditionally progressive.
Additionally, Trump is not from that area. How are you making this argument?
He had the reputation of being for the common man, not being of the establishment, which was the relevant narrative.
And I know that you seem to. I think that is O'Rourke's exact same personality. He is very much of the common man.
The other issue is that I think trying to beat the Republicans at their own game of having a TV personality is almost impossible, largely because there's no Democratic potential candidate who had an NBC show with top ratings for 10 years. There's just nobody that we can put out there.
Excuse me, Oprah.
Okay, don't run Oprah. No. Nobody run Oprah. I'm not advocating for running Oprah. Please don't run Oprah. But you get the picture. That if we're going to try to beat Trump at TV recognition, until we get the news agencies to stop covering...
Okay, I'm not saying that it's only about TV recognition, but we have already acknowledged that TV recognition and media personality are huge factors in today's elections for drumming out local grassroots support and for getting those voters to the polls. I think that O'Rourke has that charisma and has that media personality to do that. However, we are out of time. I will not have the last word. I will give it to George. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Blake start with the final word, going around, ending with George, because I've personally been angry at George.
All right. I'm going to try and set the pattern for the last word being who-ish we want for 2020. I don't have a particular named candidate. I just know that I want the presidential candidate to come out of the Rust Belt. And if I had my way, the vice presidential candidate would come out of the breadbasket. If I did not have my way, which I probably won't, the vice presidential candidate would come out of the Tidewater East Coast.
I agree with Blake on the presidential pick. I think Klobuchar. We say her
name all the time.
Klobuchar, I think she's a good choice. I think Brown would be a good choice in a vacuum, but he's not a good choice for the Senate. But for vice president, I'm actually going to have to disagree. I don't think where the vice president is from is particularly important. Joe Biden was from Delaware. Delaware. What matters is that our vice president is likable.
Joe Biden was really from Pennsylvania, though. He was demographically Pennsylvania's favorite son.
What matters is that our vice presidential candidate is likable, gaffe-prone, but not too gaffe-prone, and ultimately can campaign as an effective surrogate. I think Joe Biden was a good one, and I think looking forward, Beto O'Rourke might be a good vice presidential candidate as a sort of a popularity surrogate for whoever our pick is.
I have long said, and I started out with my discussions about O'Rourke by saying that I agree with Joe. I do believe that Brown is the best candidate, and like you said, in a vacuum, he is, and I think that he would win. So I would be happy with Brown. I think, by the way, it's interesting that no one here has mentioned Kamala Harris's name.
Oh my God, no, she should not know. No,
you already had your last word. Shut up. I think it's very interesting. I don't know much about Kamala Harris enough to be informed about her. Blake does not look happy when I mention her name, but so I think that O'Rourke would be a great vice presidential candidate, and I've often said in my discussions with people about this that Brown Beto would be an incredible ticket. That one that I would be personally excited for, as well as a Democrat, something that I think would be a good idea. But if Brown cannot do it because of his position in the Senate, I think that Klobuchar or Beto are the next two best choices for president.
I would recommend that people go back to our original episodes to see what Ryan identifies at party-wise. I think that there's an interesting shift to be seen there.
So I've already essentially answered this question. I'm going to talk about the vice president thing that Jacob brought up. I think for the Democrats, the most important role of the vice president now is to balance the identity politics issue. And I think that's exactly why. Don't make that face, Jacob. I think that explains Joe Biden much better than anything else. If you're going to have your first black president, you need a boring old white guy to balance that. As said, as the Democratic caucus
then Beto O'Rourke functions in the same way for
exactly.
Klobuchar.
God damn it, Jacob.
Yeah, that was actually my idea too.
So
fuck you.
I'm gonna say, if it is somebody like Brown,
so Oprah is the vice president. Brown is the
not Oprah. Tammy Duckworth. You guys know Tammy Duckworth?
Yeah.
You should look her up.
Tammy Duckworth would be a good pick.
I think that is my kick-ass ticket. A little bit Rust Belt heavy, but what are you gonna do? But I do agree.
Just remind me, what district is Tammy Duckworth?
Illinois, senator from Illinois.
Gotcha.
I think Klobuchar O'Rourke is a very solid ticket. Again, in my ideal world, I would have him run for the Senate and have her pick somebody, some white guy from Midwest.
There are so many.
There are a lot of white guys to pick from. But I think,
Broadfield.
given the situation it is now, Klobuchar O'Rourke would be a very solid ticket.
Not to be a complete pair, but I have to agree. Klobuchar O'Rourke ticket would be a very compelling bid. I just don't see the world in which Beto O'Rourke only being, what is he, like a he's only like a 2-term House representative from Texas. That doesn't have the level of national recognition. I'm sorry, I thought this was my last word, but if not, we can end the episode here, I guess.
Ouch.
No, but snarkiness aside, yeah, he doesn't have the level of national recognition that's necessary to win at the national level, where you have to appeal to the moderate voters. I just don't think that would work, especially considering that, yes, his campaign was primarily bolstered by outside influences, primarily being a huge amount of media attention and also a lot of a lot of out-of-state donors. So, I think that's all I have to say about that. All I have to say also, in addition to that, please don't run... Well, Democrats, as a conservative, I would say, yes, Hillary Clinton would be very good for conservatives. And also, what was the other... Kamala Harris. Yeah, Kamala Harris would be great for any conservative ticket. Like, they're going to win regardless if you run those two.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Talking TWAMPs. A reminder that we are a student organization here on campus, so the opinions of this board do not reflect the opinions of the College of William & Mary. If you found today's episode interesting, check out our backlog. We have many episodes discussing American and international politics that we would love you to listen to. And we also have many other podcasts here on the podcasting network at William & Mary, which you can find from searching in any podcasting application, the podcasting network at W&M, or look us up online. And please give us a listen and a subscription description, and tell your friends. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
See you guys.
Don't run McAuliffe.
Don't.